Recording on both? You ready?
Yeah,
No pressure, by the way. This is just total conversation, just like we were having yesterday. All
yeah.
right. Sabantho Onyi, welcome to the Gyaff. So nice to have you, also known as Skeeter Thomas or Samantha Thomas, depending on who you ask. We were just having a conversation about how you have so many different names, but in all fairness, many Guyanese have call names. So,
Sorry, I need my headdress. Oh, sorry.
no,
I'm sorry.
absolutely not. Where is it?
When I'm in the vehicle, I can't put it on because the
Oh, yeah, no,
feathers.
no, no, it's okay. Go for it.
Yeah.
If you need a mirror, we've got a mirror in the bathroom right there.
No, it's cool. This is a huge part, so I can't
No,
keep that on.
definitely. Let's keep that in there because it's, All
Okay.
right. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, what's going on? How are you doing?
I am fantastic.
Yeah.
This is something new to me, and I'm excited.
What's new? Just the interview. I don't like calling this an interview. What's new about this to you? Because you've done this before.
Okay, yes, I have done this, interview before, but I think that, from knowing what you do, I think that this is more of the communication is different. It's like, it's a gaff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's comfortable and
Yeah.
yeah, it's different to me, and I'm excited to be here. So
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm happy you're here, and I'm so happy you came wearing your traditional wear. Is that? I just wanna. I call it. It's okay to call it traditional wear, right? Is that the? Well, what do you call your outfit?
well, what do you call your outfit?
Clothes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, this is just like close to me because well, for me, if I can go everywhere just like this, I would definitely do that. I
Why
am
don't
proud.
you? Why don't you?
For some reason, in many, there are many instances where society like thinks of you differently. They make mean comments sometimes, and I wouldn't say that I'm afraid of it or anything like that, but it's just that sometimes I really don't have the time to deal with that
Yeah.
because I am bigger than just, mean comments or, as we say, low talks, right?
Yeah.
So, and also, it's kind of like not difficult, but sometimes it's hard to get these actual outfits done because, and that's one of the things that are unfortunately dying in many indigenous cultures as well.
Yeah, a lot to talk about there. But just to go back to my original point, well, thank you for wearing your normal clothes. And I appreciate it because actually when we spoke earlier, I remember we had a meeting the other day to talk about something different, and we discussed doing this, and you were adamant you wouldn't do it unless you could wear the clothes you wanted to. And I
Exactly.
said, well, fantastic. I love that. So I'm happy you're here. And it's so good to finally sit down with you and talk. Just to give the people watching just a very brief background on who you are and what you do. Could you just sort of give us that outline of what it is you do? You do some very interesting work, but we just want the full scope of the work you do, just to set context.
Okay, well, once again, I'm Sabantho Onyi. I'm a language activist, a teacher, and an advocate for mostly Indigenous people, but not only limited to Indigenous people.
And you are from where in Guyana?
I was born in Wakapaw village, that's in the lower Pomeroon area.
What was that like growing up in the Lower Pomeroon and specifically in Wakapaw Village? Is that, did you spend your whole childhood there, or were you in and out? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Well, I was born to fluent Lokono speakers, and my childhood was the happiest I can think of. They weren't anything fancy, anything like today, like Wakapaw is today. it was completely different, but growing up in a loving home with my parents there always supporting everything I do, it was perfect.
Yeah.
And I actually got a Hinterland scholarship when I wrote my we call it common entrance then,
Yeah.
grade 6.
Grade 6.
Yeah. So I was like one of the top students
From
right
Makapao?
through. Yeah.
Nice.
From grade 1 to 6, I always came first in class. So as a child, I was doing, exceptionally well. But even though I knew that in my little mind, I never thought that I would have to leave home to further my education. So when I actually heard about this whole scholarship and going to school in Georgetown, I was scared. I was not happy at all. But my parents, they it was like they were happy that I was going to get a chance to further my education than just going to school in the village.
When you came to school in Georgetown, this was for high school after writing the grade 6 common entrance.
Yes.
Where'd you go?
I went to North Georgetown Secondary School.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this a common experience for many young Indigenous kids in rural villages? And when I say rural, I just mean out of Georgetown, to leave and then come in to go to school. And then how is that transition for you?
Well, at that time, it was probably the only way to get a higher level of education.
Yeah.
Nowadays, there are a few secondary schools here and there, but it's still a scary experience for a child. Like, especially from my personal experience, leaving home and coming to the city, it took a toll on me like almost immediately. I was out of my comfort zone. Being a student who achieved, a lot academically, my grades sort of like was cut completely in half. I remember my first end of term exam at North Georgetown Secondary School. I got like 54%. And I was scared to even show my guardian or even tell anybody about that. I've never had grades that low all my life, all my school life. So by that alone, you can tell that I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't functioning the way I was in my primary school years.
Why do you think that was? Is it just the timidness of being in a new environment? Were you intimidated by the different society? Was the school not good? What do you think were the reasons for that?
It was definitely the change. I remember there were kids in school that used to come up to me, and I experienced bullying in secondary school.
Bullying.
Yeah, excuse me, in like the kids weren't accustomed, I guess, to seeing an Indigenous person dwelling with them on a daily basis. They would ask me, like, how does it feel to wear a boots? And have you ever worn a uniform before? These, kids.
Yeah, kids are mean.
Questions that made me feel, out of place, sort of inferior in that space. But, I had my own rebuttals.
I'm sure you
for
did.
bullying, especially.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Kids would want to take away your food, take your ribbon off your hair, and all these things. I remember one time I had a friend, another Indigenous girl from Sand Creek. She was on scholarship as well, and they took away her badge. And she was crying, and
Her badge?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was crying, and she came to me and she said, I have to get my badge. my guardian would be so mad with me. I have to get my badge. I can't go home without it. So I knew who took it away. She was like 2 grades higher than us. So I went to her sister because she was in the grade with us. And I told her, I said, listen, I know your sister took Arlene, the girl was Arlene's badge. And I want you to tell her if she don't give it back, I'm going to call my father. And she's like, you can't call your father. They don't have phones in the bush. I said, I don't have to use a phone. She's like, so how are you going to call your father? I said, you don't worry about that. I will call him. And if I tell him what she did, she would be sorry. Because, even today, a lot of people don't understand the whole aspect of indigenous cultures and the spiritual aspect, to be more on point, is that it gets people scared. And she went to run to her sister and said she should give back the badge because her friend, which is me, threatening her. It's a funniest story. Like, this just came to mind because of course, for the whole bullying thing in school. And myself and the other indigenous girl, we became the best of friends from that day forward. And I think also from that day, that is one of the things that, the kids were sort of scared of me for some reason. But I just did that like in defense for my friend. And, it was so many different things in growing up. And if I'm to talk about just days in North Georgetown, it would take all day.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting experience. I think like to come from, and I've been to school with kids from, different communities. In my high school primary experience, and you're right. It does. I think not to say that people don't make friends, by the way, eventually, but kids are very standoffish and cliquey. I think that's it's normal. It's not how they do it is obviously not always the best way.
Yeah.
But it really tests the limit. It really, forces you to either, like you did, rise above the situation and take control of it, or some kids just sort of submit, which is unfortunate. And it's definitely an interesting part of our school system as well. With having different people, I think Asian or Chinese kids kind of get the same, issues, or kids that maybe come in that don't necessarily speak English if they've migrated to Guyana and now are entering school. So yeah, it's definitely something. But that's really funny. Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask you, how did you, like, once you graduated, you're a sort of a language professional now. You do a lot of translation and work with researching the Arawak or Lokono language. You told me Arawak, there are 2 types of Arawaks. There's islander and as well as sort of mainland. Mm-hmm. What do you call it?
It's, for us, we would, the Lokonos in general are referred to as mainland Arawaks.
Okay.
And the island Arawaks are the Tainos, which are, there are many Tainos, still around and descendants of Tainos. But the culture has, like the Arawakan culture and the languages, it's slowly, it's on the verge of dying. Taino, there is less language still, around today.
Yeah.
That is why I think that's also what motivated me into, being who I am today. My mom, she was the one who actually kept the language alive in our family. Well, also my dad, but she took the lead. She not worked per se, but she dedicated a lot of her time and her knowledge to folks from the Caribbean, from the University of the West Indies, and many others who, were interested and willing to learn the language and also about the language. She had, well, I say she has one. There is a young lady, her name is Deidre Telford. She's Jamaican. She did her thesis on the Lokono language, and she and my mom, they were very close. My mom used to call her Jamaican daughter, because uh, that was one that relationship, I should say, started like sometime around 2002, and they worked through the years until my mom passed in 2018. In 2018, my mom actually was still in Georgetown at the Mother Language Day at UG, the celebrations, the events that took place. She actually was still very active, even in that time. She was, so close to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the state of language like? I mean, I know you have obviously majority experience with Arawak, but what is the state of, language being passed on to the new generation? I mean, there's so many more distractions now that kids have with, technology and stuff like that. My suspicion, and, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, they don't have a lot of time to focus, or they don't have a lot of will to focus on traditional aspects of their culture. And, as a result, there's a threat of these things dying, especially language. What is the state of that in your opinion? And how do you sort of deal with that being in the language profession?
Well, as my father used to say, there is a possibility in every negativity, because all right, it's like today there is so much technology all around us, right? Yes, the kids are they're distracted, not only the kids but even young adults,
Yeah.
they're the ones who are mostly distracted. Everybody's on the internet all day, every day. So now with technology, it's actually easier to get a message out. Therefore, I would see it as a means of preserving, sharing, promoting whatever is left of your culture and building on that what is still there. So technology is definitely a distraction as well as an opportunity.
You seem to turn it into an opportunity with all the
Yes.
content you make, the posts you make, promoting the language, doing direct translations. Very interactive. I think that's so cool. How has the response been to all of your? This is just, by the way, to those listening, part of the work you do. I mean, there's
Yes.
so much more we'll get into, but how has the response been to your posts online, or when your sort of attempt to educate and share this culture?
As of recently, I've been doing this for many years. By the way, all my adult life, I should say, I've dedicated most part of it to language revitalization, preservation of whatever data we have, and also building on what we have. I've been doing this for many years, along with my mother when she was still alive. We did a lot of work, and I continued. And today, I'm at a level where, like you said, promoting the language and doing videos and translation of books and actually teaching the language to, whoever is interested. And it's more of the opportunities. Before it wasn't, especially when it comes to resources and actually getting all of this knowledge over to people, weren't more likely not available to me at the time. But now, with what I'm doing, fortunately for me, I've met with the Academic Council of Lokono. It's an organization formed right here in Guyana, and we have folks from the village of Bakuri. We have connections to Maraikabai, Oriala, Wakapau, of course. It is more centered in the work that we do is more centered in Wakapau village. And it is becoming a big thing now. Promoting the language. Let me see how I can put this. Okay, put a video up on YouTube, and subscription from 57 rise to it's like way past 1800 within a week.
Wow.
So you can see
So there's interest.
Yeah, there is much interest now. On my on my Facebook platform, there are many people who started, hitting me up on Messenger. Oh, we want to learn, and this is interesting, and congratulating us on what we're doing, and you see the interest there, and you see that people are eager to learn, and some people even offer to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as opportunity goes with regards to this endeavor, I mean, how do you get the resources to build and improve upon what you're doing? I mean, it's obviously not something you're very passionate about it, but it still has to be sustainable. I know there's a lot of rhetoric nationally about, we need to preserve our culture and indigenous culture, excuse me. Does most of the funding come from the government, or is that more like private agencies that, sort of allow you to operate and do the work you're doing?
Well, it's kind of unfortunate to say this, but most of basically all of my work is funded through the Academic Council of Lokono Ajian.
Okay.
I'm yet to work on any project that is funded by the government.
But how does the council get their resources? Because you said, the reason I'm asking, because you said it was developed by local communities, right?
Yes, it was developed. The actual organization was developed locally in Guyana here, but most of the funding comes from the Council of Native Caribbean Heritage, which is an organization. It's the person who actually heads the organization is Dr. Juan Aviles Morales.
Oh, okay.
He is a descendant of the Taino Nation, and he collaborates he's also Christian, so it's like a collaboration with the CONCH, which is the Council of Native Caribbean Heritage, and the Lokono, the Academic Council of Lokono Ajian. So right now, as it is, all of the funding for the resources and getting this out there is definitely coming from the CONCH, the organization.
Gotcha. I didn't even. That's so cool, though. I didn't know that institution existed regionally.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
And also, we are not just about language revitalization. We've started like last year, February. We started with beekeeping in the communities as a community development project for the people. And, that's presently in Pakuri, Wakapau, and Maraikabai. We've been in contact with Oriala, like I said, and it's beekeeping. Why beekeeping? It's because this is something that is, interior location. Bees are there.
Yeah.
It's not something that you have to look at every day. People can actually still continue doing their regular jobs or farming or whatever, and it is sustainable. It's definitely sustainable. Partnered with like local beekeepers right here in Guyana, and they would train people. Of course, they're paid for whatever training they provide. It's just a way of actually helping communities, providing a space where they can actually gain, even if they start on small scale, gain from it in the near future,
Yeah.
right? So all of this is positive initiatives, the helpful initiatives for the communities, and working hand in hand with them on language revitalization. Because as you know, or as you may know, I think, Maracaibo is predominantly Lokono as well as Oriala, Wakapau, Pakuri. These are Lokono villages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could we be doing more in terms of the educational, incorporating languages, indigenous languages into the educational system, not necessarily nationally, but especially like in Lokono or Arawak villages? The schools that are in there, is language part of the institution when kids are learning, or is that something that you have to seek elsewhere? What is the sort of government's role, or the educational system's role in getting that done, the national educational system? You say a lot of your funding for the work you do comes from a regional organization, Conch, and the academic council
Of Lokono and Guyana, yes.
How can we get this more on a national, like into our educational system?
From experience, I could tell you that being a part of Guyanese Languages Unit, it's an organization based within the University of Guyana. There were many instances, how should I put this, proposals of introducing indigenous languages, not just Lokono, but the languages into the school, into the curriculum. But unfortunately, there is no response to that to date. I know the Wapichan, they teach their kids the language in their schools. They demand as a community, it is their decision to make.
Gotcha.
To teach this language and keep the language alive within the schools for their children. Right? I think the Makushi Research Unit is also a space where the language is preserved. Right? But Wapichan and Makushi is not on the verge of dying. And I'm happy that this is being done within these spaces of the Wapichan Nation and the Makushi Nation, right? Therefore, incorporating Lokono in Lokono communities is, for me, that would be a dream come true. And I am working presently, and I'm going to continue as long as it takes to get that. This knowledge has to be. It is crucial to preserve the knowledge of the Lokono nation, the language, the culture, the traditions, every aspect of our culture. It is crucial for us as a people to preserve this. Our cultures and especially our languages, I should say. This is what defines us as a people. We are not all the same. We were created differently for a reason. We don't all look the same. I mean, we may resemble a lot, but we're not all the same. Therefore, we have different heritages, and it is a must for us to preserve who we truly are as a nation. The Lokono nation, the language is listed as moribund and endangered, But with like-minded folks like myself and the people I work with, I am sure, and I say this, proudly, that I am sure that we will preserve the Lokono language.
Yeah.
And I must say I am very thankful for the Conch and the Academic Council of Lokono Aji, and for, helping us and providing that opportunity for us to do more for our generations to come. Because whatever we preserve, that is what we pass on. Right? We can't, every time an elder, a fluent speaker of the language, every time an elder dies, the language the whole, it's like, especially like for me when an elder from my community passed away as fluent speaker, it hurts me like so deep. It's like, there goes the language, there goes traditional knowledge, you know, and with that dying, it's literally like it hurts me because I know, you know, if I was given an opportunity, like in my teenage years, mind you, I'm a grandmother now, so if I was given this opportunity to preserve the language, culture, traditions of the Lokono Nation during, let's say, 20 years ago, right? Imagine the amount of data that I would have preserved today, right? This is like roughly about 10 years of work, and only, let's say, in the last year that I was given the opportunity to, you know, work more on the language and put it out there, right? So it's definitely a part that I would love to have, like more people, children. My daughter is 9 years old, and you know, whatever I teach, whatever it's there. She's keeping it alive. So if we can have 10 kids, 20 kids, 30 kids, and we have lots of children, because Indigenous people, that's one of their hobbies. So if we can have kids learning this language and preserving it and just like, sometimes I'm lost for words, sorry. Yeah. But if we can have this in our communities, in each Lokono community, if you can teach this language to the children, imagine growing with that for another 10 years, what the language will be like.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
That's definitely like, well, that's my dream.
Yeah. And that comes from the push from people like you, whether it's language or other aspects of culture or initiatives, it comes from the push of the people to carry it on. I am curious though, from your opinion, I know you don't speak on behalf of all Indigenous people, but you're obviously a big activist. You're involved. You're one of the most proud people I've met about their culture.
Thank you.
With regards to the development happening, we're in such a crazy time in Guyana's history, where the amount of force that is going to be put on our development is going to affect so many people. How does this change, the dynamics of community, Indigenous communities? Mm. But what do you see happening in most communities? Is there more economic opportunity? Is it threatening traditional livelihoods? What sort of outlook are you seeing with regards to our development?
Well, I've had the opportunity of meeting with a number of Indigenous communities, and everywhere I go, there is a need. The people, they want more. It's just that they don't. Some communities may not know how to go about, preserving their cultures, right? And I think, well, this is just my opinion, of course. I think if more emphasis is placed on the actual preservation of Indigenous cultures by, let's say, the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, right? We have an entire ministry there that is supposed to be representing us. Well, that represents us, I must say. If they can place more emphasis on the actual preservation of cultures in these communities, I think that would be a great plus for Indigenous people in general.
In your opinion, what is their focus on now? What do you see their focus on? Not in a critical way, but what do you see them spending most of their time and resources on with regards to Indigenous communities?
Well, some communities receive more sort of like assistance in development than some. the village of Wakapao, for instance, we don't have potable water. We don't have a working well. We don't have electricity and these type of things, right?
So how
But-
do you get your water? Sorry, just to
Yeah.
interject.
All right. In Wakapao, we still have our traditional reservoir, as we call them, ponds,
Okay.
that we use for drinking water. A few years ago, when there was this huge dry season, and all the ponds were drying, and everybody was getting sick and all of that, I actually approached the region. I spoke to friends. I tried all my best to seek assistance for us in the community, and I got assistance, a little assistance from the University of Guyana, and I remember going into the village and collecting the water bottles, buckets, whatever I could get to take it to charity, to just get drinking water for the people, because people were getting sick all over because of contaminated water.
Yeah.
And today there's not much difference in the community, when the rain falls, sometimes the rain will fall, especially during, the different seasons, when you get rainwater, that is what people have to depend on. Or if not, you have to go to the charity to buy clean water to give to your children and, for daily use. Right? That is still the system in Wakapao. So some communities, yes, they're, developing. Some are not.
What's the population there?
Wakapao has over 3,000
Over
residents.
3,000?
Yes,
And still you relying on water from the pond.
exactly.
Wow.
Wakapao is it's a community with 29 scattered islands, and I think 22 to 23 now inhabited. So with that space, by that alone, that, there are a lot of people living in this community.
Yeah.
And there are many people who actually moved from the community because of the economic system and, different things. There was no jobs in Wakapao. I love my community, and I would go there from time to time, but I can't survive there
Yeah.
because there's no job for me.
Interesting point. Want to continue on that topic, but just to quickly segue here, given that the community is 3,000 plus people, you obviously aren't you guys eligible as beneficiaries from the LCDS funds? Does that play a role in getting things like a water system or a well in and those kind of resources?
Well, I am not too familiar with the schematics of the, beneficiaries of LCDS funds and all of that. Even though I'm in communication with the leaders, the Tushawan Village Council, I know that, yes, there are funds that are made available from time to time, I think every year. But like I said, I'm not too familiar with the actual benefits of the LCDS. What I know is that the solar panels and the setup that was given to the residents in Wakapao. And there are other small projects that the community would undertake from time to time. But then again, what's the point of going into a project which demands faster rotation of funds, of money? You can't sustain an initiative where you don't have the money to keep it going, right? Even the residents, let's say, okay, majority of the people there are farmers, right? But they can't farm on a large scale. Like my brother, once he tried it, farming on a large scale. And there was so many produce, nowhere to sell it, nobody to buy stuff. He would get like those big tubs of tomato and bora, all of these things that he reaped a lot, and he would just have to end up sharing it.
Yeah.
So, There is not the marketing is not available there. For a lot of communities like Wakapao, if you can have like a agro processing plant in the community where the factory buys your stuff, people would be motivated and people would want to farm on a larger scale. But when nothing is available and whatever you have, if you have to go all the way to charity, that's transportation, that's freight, that's a whole job in itself to go to an uncertain market. You don't know if you get your stuff sold here because there are so many people going to charity to try to get the same thing that you're looking for. So,
yeah. In your opinion, if there was an agro processing facility, and this is just hypothetical, I'm not trying to put a lot of pressure on you, I just kind of want your perspective. If there was an agro processing facility and a market available, do you think the community, whether it's Wakapa or other communities in general, who have not had experience doing commercial farming, because with commercial farming you need to have consistent turnover, do you think the community would be able to mobilize in order to produce that consistency? Because when you're sort of accustomed to just sustenance farming, it's sort of just do as you need. But when you sort of get into a commercial venture, you have an obligation now to produce. How difficult is that transition for a community?
Well, one thing I could say, the land is available. Wakapa is huge, like I said, And I do think that given the opportunity to, like expand your farms, whatever you're doing, I think if the folks are given that opportunity, and like other communities, they can definitely sustain that the marketing aspect of it. I would think export or if you provide that market there. Guyana imports so many things that we can actually make right here.
Yeah.
So if we can provide that, if indigenous communities can, like I know Paramakatay they make the ketchup, right? And yet still we buy different brands, outside brands, So I know Guyanese are foreign minded, by the way, but but if we can make to that same the same quality as what we import, I definitely think indigenous communities, they have a chance of gaining, developing their community more on an economic level.
Yeah, it would be great. I mean, that opportunity is there, and it's just sort of us figuring out the right formula so that we're able to fulfill markets, we get our products out there, competitively. And I'm not sure what exactly would be the government's role in that. I mean, I'm sure they can do more.
Definitely.
But I'm not sure how that synergy would work. It would be interesting to have somebody, in on this conversation offering suggestions. But you're absolutely right. That ideally would be what we should do. You were talking about leaving Wakapao because there's not much opportunity for you there. You obviously want to grow as a professional and do what you do. Do many other people feel the same way? Young kids, I mean, the majority, do they leave the village or do they sort of come back and find things to do?
Very few would go back. Majority of the people leave, and
This is because they want to go make money, start a career.
Exactly. Nobody wants to be stuck. I've personal experience. If I'm to be in Wakapao, my internet would definitely not be as it is in the city or on the coast, And even on the Escobar Coast, sometimes you don't get that. It's easier, and you work at a faster pace when you're out here. When you're in Wakapao, sometimes the signal cuts off completely for days. That throws you out, because if you have a deadline or if you have something that you're working on, you're communicating with people on the outside, you have no signal, you have no internet. What happens then? you know.
Yeah.
So that is from my personal experience. But I know of teachers. I know of, because the teaching profession is actually one of the things that you can start at a lower level and you can develop that by going to college, furthering that. I've seen people in Wakapao who started, teaching an untrained teacher, come out here, go to college, worked out here, and just go back to do whatever they're obligated to do the time, and just leave as soon as they can leave, they leave. Because the opportunities are not available in Wakapao for them as is available in the city. So definitely, if you want to, expand or you want to further your education, there is no way you can be in the community and do that. So
Yeah.
you leave.
Yeah. If you
Right?
if you were to flood the community with technological resources, stronger economy, more markets, does that change? Will that rapidly destroy the culture and traditions of that community? Is there anything blocking things that are conducive to quote unquote growth because it may change indigenous culture? How do you reconcile those two, tradition and modernization?
Well, I always think that development doesn't mean modernization. Modernization is inevitable. Our cultures, our traditions, we have to be the one that are willing to preserve it, to promote it, to we as indigenous people, it is our knowledge, it is our culture. We have to be willing to do this in order for it to last and in order for it to be passed on to the next generation. Right? So, okay. The Academic Council of Lokono, Guyana, in our future plans, I should say, to introduce the language into the schools. Doing this through technology is probably the easiest way to get it there, right? If you have a tablet or a MacBook, whatever, technology is there that you can actually store this info in. If you can work with that, promoting and preserving your language that way, it's easier. Therefore, development in that aspect, right? I don't see that as taking away from our culture and tradition, right? Like I say again, it is inevitable for us to evolve as a people. Evolving doesn't mean that you have to forget your past, or you have the knowledge of your past is what shapes your future. Therefore, that knowledge preserved, promoted, and shared, that is what is actually needed in our culture as indigenous people, right? If I am to sing a song and explain it to you, if you listen to me in person, chances are by the end of the day you forgot, or maybe next hour you forget what I said. But if I record that and I send it to you, you listen, you learn, and then that's passed on to you. That is how I see it. That's how I see technology and tradition.
Yeah.
That's how I weigh it.
Yeah, and it's a great way to see it. I think ultimately it's up to the community to get on the same page in that regard and push together,
Exactly.
come up with a plan. Funny you say that. Brings me to my next sort of topic. We were talking earlier about all these traditions, not traditions, these superstitions and stories that are passed down.
Yes.
a lot having to do with I won't call it supernatural, but very
Spiritual.
spiritual. Thank you. I'm still thinking about the story you told me earlier. Very,
Oh.
spiritual occurrences that have happened, and people sort of take that forward in their beliefs and stuff like that. Why do you think those things are so pervasive in the culture? That there's always things you should do and shouldn't do based on these spiritual occurrences that are passed down by elders and people that have come before. And then they live on to today. Well, what role does that play in Indigenous communities?
Well, if I may use the term belief kills and belief cures,
Okay.
right? For me, the culture and the traditions of the Lokono people, when you're born into a culture, and these, how do I put it, the whole spiritual aspect of the culture, you live with this belief. The mind is the greatest healer of your body. Therefore, whatever goes on in this mind, your body reacts to it. So I know as a young woman and a Lokono child, I know that there are certain times as you grow up, you become a young lady and you are on your period, that I am not supposed to go to the water, to the creeks. That is taboo. That is prohibited in every sense of our culture.
This is taught by mothers to their
Yeah.
daughters.
This has been passed on from generation to generation,
Why is that?
right? There are certain things that I cannot explain to you because it wasn't explained to me, if I may put it this way. But we know that. We believe that. And I have seen persons who disobey this particular belief in my community, my own relatives. I've seen the horrors that they go through. We believe, Indigenous people believe in living in oneness with our environment, right? If you would talk to my daughter and ask her to pick a leaf or a branch for you in the night, she would tell you she can't do it. Because that was taught to me. You respect your environment. The trees, the plants, there's only exceptions when it's urgent or when it's crucial that you travel the plants, leaves, like for medicinal purpose, in an emergency, these type of things. That's the only time you would go and you would, well, we talk to the tree, we talk to the plant, and then we would break a branch, pick a leaf. These type of these belief systems has been passed down to our generation, and I teach that to my children. So whatever whatever you believe in, I think that is exactly what materialized. Because I have a schoolmate. She lived like on another island from where I was living. I lived on the island with the health center. She was pregnant with her first child, and she went into labor at home. And her husband had to bring her to the health center in order for her to give birth. And, she started, the whole process actually started in the boat. So she went up, she delivered her baby and whatnot. And her husband, he bailed the boat and whatever was in the boat, he threw it in the landing. And the next morning, the cleaner wanted to know why he was sleeping. He was still sleeping in the boat when the sun was up. it's not normal. And she went to wake him up. And nobody else was like around, or nobody saw anybody to say he was in any fight with anybody or whatever, but he was dead. His neck was broken. So the same day she got her first child was the same day her husband died. Now these things are true events. That it's not 80 or 90 years ago. This is like 20 years, maybe 20 something years ago. This happened because, my boy is 19 now, and I think her son is just a few years older than him. So these are things that happen that we know of, and we respect our beliefs, our tradition. We respect it for these reasons because we have first-hand experience of what happens.
This is based on the belief that because he put the water from her birthing, he threw it on the landing?
And blood as well.
Blood, okay,
into
right.
the water.
Gotcha.
So there are spirits that govern the waters.
Yeah.
There are spirits that govern the forests. There are so many different aspects of our belief that, as an Indigenous advocate, I think my knowledge of these things are a little more clearer than people who haven't, had the experience or ever really focused more on spiritual. Trust me, and I've been called a spiritualist and all of these names because of my, my beliefs, because of what I do, because of my closeness with our cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, you always kind of, depending on the community, depending on the group, you really hear some interesting stories that, really like you said, really come back to how people have their relationship with their natural environment, right? A lot of that is what it's rooted in.
Yes.
And that's how people have survived and thrived for years.
Yes.
It's fascinating stuff. I wish a lot of it was documented, just like the language. Perhaps it's
Exactly.
not as readily available unless you hear it from an elder or someone in the know.
Yeah.
How have those when you sort of tell someone who's from Georgetown or not familiar with that culture, like what are the responses like, to that sort of thing?
Well, a lot of people are scared.
Yeah.
Scared of Bina. That's one of the most talked about topic.
Bina, just for people that don't know, Bina is basically like
it's people having, they describe it as a charm and spiritual work, whatever. But in most cases, people are scared of these cultures. And I guess that's just because they don't understand, right? Fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, no, a lot of people think that what happens in Indigenous communities when it comes to spirituality, that it's mostly bad, but it's because they don't understand. I don't.
It's also something they can't control, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yes. So, and I don't really get into any detailed conversation with somebody who I know is scared. If somebody's interested, I would sit and I would explain to them or talk to them. And, people who understand it to a certain level, then they would know that it's not all bad or not something to be scared of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to move on to your one of your roles as an activist, not only for Indigenous groups but just in general, women. How does that part of your life work? Like, what do you advocate for specifically within communities, and what are some of the challenges that are faced. The reason I found this interesting because recently with all the budget and year-end review stuff going on, I did see the Ministry of Indian Affairs, specifically the minister, put out a statement. Well, it was a headline basically saying, "Oh, there's been no little to no reports of any forms of abuse within villages." Thought that was interesting, not because I know a lot about what happens in villages, but it clearly was a response to something that clearly exists. What are your thoughts, and what sort of activism is needed within Indigenous communities?
Okay, so one of the hats that I wear as an advocate, this actually started with just being very open to people in many different communities. I was told I'm very approachable. So, from time to time you would meet people that, they kind of find a comfort zone to talk to you.
Yeah.
This is what actually started my whole advocacy. I didn't start it like as anything that would become more than just trying to help people, because of my constant back and forth to the city. It actually started with helping people to get their birth certificates and doing late registration, especially for the folks in environmental. There are many people there who, they don't even know when they were born. They were never given an actual name. And if I'm to go on, talk about Barmita, there are so many, so many things that I can share with you. But as the years go, like meeting with so many cases of these ills that goes on in the communities, in my own community, from personal experience, from having to deal with this. Actually, that is something that made me. It's not just like something that I went into, but this has caused me to try to do more than I can than what was being done. And today, I am part of the Indigenous Peoples Movement, Guyana's Indigenous Peoples Movement. It is the Indigenous delegation who were interacting on a forum with a number of organizations, NGOs mostly, last year. And ever since we started, like as a group, trying to reach out to people, trying to help those whoever we can, try to seek some sort of justice in many ways, but mostly trying to help people. Even if it's just by creating a report and sending it to the relevant authorities. We were in talks with the DPP, with the ministry, different entities, because in a lot of cases, these incidents are not reported.
What incidents are you dealing with?
It's domestic violence. It's rape, incest, human trafficking, sexual abuse in so many different ways. It's like a silent, I don't know how to put this, but it's something that people, for far too long, it has been ignored. Reports would reach to the police would go and try to, quote unquote, settle the matter. But how can you settle a matter between a grown man who has sexually assaulted, I would say, a child, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, even an 11-year-old? I've seen children who are at those tender age pregnant. There are cases presently that I know of where these, especially the young women, are suffering from sexual abuse, from rape, from incest, from so many things. There are women who are being abused, and when it comes to an official report going out, there is no case so far that we as a group have heard about, we know about, that got any justice, any help or assistance when it comes to these matters. There was a very public case with an 11-year-old who was pregnant. The Child Protection Agency took custody of the child. There was nothing said about the future of this child. Now, the group that I'm in, we actually tried to locate the child. We tried reaching out to many other organizations. We tried to meet with whoever was responsible. A lot of people may not agree with it, but wouldn't it have been easier to terminate a pregnancy in an 11-year-old than to take her full term and then do a C-section to take that baby out?
They took her to full term.
Full term. And then perform a C-section.
How far into the pregnancy before they took custody of her?
I think she was somewhere around 3 months. That is why we actually thought of there was a chance that it still can be terminated.
And what were the parents' involvement in this?
The mother is a victim of domestic abuse.
Okay.
She wasn't capable of handling that situation. From what I heard, that she's an alcoholic to date. And it's like she couldn't help her own daughter. And even the person who was responsible for that horrifying situation, even that person wasn't brought to justice. Like they weren't held responsible. The whole aspect of dealing with this as it should have been dealt with. Nothing so far. I have 2 colleagues who live in the village that this child was living in. Well, it's a satellite village to the other village, but they work closely with these people. They visit the homes. They try to see whatever help can be given to this family, not just the child. So these cases are so, as a parent, as a mother of a girl child, these things are more than just, I don't see them just as cases. They are personal. I have kids. My daughter is still young, but I have nieces, I have relatives who are at this stage, these preteens and teenagers. How can you, as a police officer, tell a parent that her 13-year-old matter is settled by taking money from the perpetrator? They're paying the police, and that's where the story ends. I have information from Tushaus who are at a loss as to what to do. They don't know how to deal with the situation. They live miles and miles away from an actual police station. And then even when you make the effort to go to the police station, what does the police do? There are cases where CDOs, those are people who work under the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, community development officers who impregnate young women under the age of 16. And nothing is being done about it. So when the system isn't working for these young people, they need representative. People need help, and when people need help, and you can give it to them, at least for me, if I can help someone, I do it. And trust me, I've received a lot of negative approaches from different people, like, you know, why would you speak out? Why would you say this? Aren't you afraid of people in higher places and higher power? You know, aren't you afraid? I say what I say. With I represent the people who I represent, and I say what I say, and I say this. I say this with all conviction. I can stand up and I can represent at all costs, because as a mother and as a representative who have seen these horrifying events happen in so many communities, somebody has to do something. And if the people who are put in position, the welfare officers who are supposed to be working with the communities, the ministry who is responsible for the indigenous peoples, if they are not going to do anything, well, then you have to look elsewhere. If publicity, and this is one of the things, these are very, the cases when it comes to sexually abused children and domestic abuse, they're sensitive cases.
Yeah.
So you have, when sometimes, unfortunately, when this kind of like develop, and when people have to live with this, and it ends in suicide, people don't understand what these people who actually think that that's the only way out, right? They don't understand what these children go through. And I say children because I know I've lived in Barometer during a period of time where I remember there were death, suicide and murder. 7 persons died in the space of 1 week. So that's 1 death per day. There were 4 suicides and 3 murders. So what is our society doing? What are we turning into as an indigenous community like Barometer? What are you going to see? What is your thoughts, or how do you deal with this?
Yeah. It's correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like, the route to justice is such a long one from a community that doesn't have, outside of the village council, I guess, who I don't know what their ability of enforcement or reprimanding someone or punishment is. They probably don't really have none. They have to refer to the actual legal system or justice system. You get on to the enforcement, which is police. Now, we know how that goes, not only with indigenous communities, but, society at large. Should a person's story of sexual abuse, as an example, ever make it to the national discourse, it instantly becomes super politicized because the agencies meant to protect these people have failed. It becomes politicized, and then you have now the whole system acting against the actual victim who's trying to seek justice. It becomes this political back and forth, whether it's government being defensive or opposition using it as fuel for their fire and their fight. So, you're now using trauma. It becomes even more collateral damage, and then the cause is like, well, what even happened anymore? So I think that is a very unfortunate and pretty much awful part of our society.
Exactly. And this actually reminds me of a case where a young girl was sexually abused and almost maimed by an outsider, I say, because it wasn't somebody from the village. It was people a guy who was working, they were miners, right? Coastlanders. And imagine No, she was younger. I think she was 14. Yeah. She was 14 years old. She was sexually assaulted to the point that she couldn't walk. And her 16-year-old brother, seeing his sister in that state, he went and looked for the guy because police hold the guy and then he went out on bail. And he looked for the guy and he beheaded that man. Right? Because that's the only way he saw justice for his sister, being in that state. Now, if he live in a different, if he were living in a different country, a defense would say temporary insanity, and that's exactly what happened here, right? That's the perfect example of temporary insanity. But that child, that young man, is in prison for the rest of his life. I say for the rest of his life because he just went to prison on remand. There's nobody to represent him. There's a case that was called to me by the commission, the Rights of a Child Commission, called a case to me where a man is on remand, an indigenous man is on remand for the past 28 years because of being unrepresented, because of some altercation with somebody. I think it's manslaughter or something like that. But these things happen in our society, in our villages. They happen. And imagine being on remand for 28 years for something that is not even, you're not even proven guilty of this. You haven't received a sentence, but you're there.
Yeah.
Right? And these things are a result. Most time it's because of a personal matter, because of something somebody did to you, and you try to seek the jungle justice, as they call it.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a part of how people would think, this is the only way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
They know there's no system that exists to give them any sort of reprieve.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's obviously very glaring in far-reaching communities, but same thing happens in our society here, right?
Yeah.
It's like how many people are killed on the roads, and it's settled.
Yeah.
But everybody walks, well, other than the people who've lost family and friends, our loved ones. But thank you for sharing that. I mean, like that's definitely something that I think is, has been taboo, or it is taboo.
Yeah.
And people are very much afraid to speak out for fear of victimization and stuff like that. But I do understand, as an activist, that's part of the thing you sign up for. And I really appreciate you putting it into context for me and my audience, because, we hear about it a lot. And again, when you hear about it, if anybody there shares their experience, they're immediately the finger is pointed and the blame is cast.
Exactly.
The pressure is put on. So it's interesting how we are as a society. But, moving on to even more divisive conversations, it's you and I were talking a couple of days ago, and we were just talking about the whole landscape of politics and things being politicized. And I was curious as to your thoughts on, it's an election year this year, and we know the indigenous population is a big part of consequential voting demographic.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, your thoughts. And again, disclaimer, you don't speak for all indigenous people.
Exactly.
But I'm interested to know your thoughts on how the indigenous vote is treated, every cycle, and what is your feel for what indigenous people think with regards to that and their role in the sort of political landscape.
Okay, so in my view, the lack of education on political matters are a huge deciding factor when it comes to politics in and amongst the indigenous peoples, right? Because I say this because I remember talking to a woman in the village, and she's like, she wants to know if it's true that they wouldn't receive any benefit if they voted against the government. The reason being that her son was in an accident and he wasn't able to walk, and she was seeking public assistance for him. Right? She said that every time she tries to talk to the Tushao or the counselors, it don't ever get like further than just begging them. Somebody told her that, and it was during election time too. That time too, and I told her, said Granny, they call her Granny. I said, Granny, that is not true. You don't have to support the present government to get benefits that you're entitled to. And this is not just about public assistance. I know of people who thinks that their community, they wouldn't be able to get. Of course, it's all about unfortunately, it's all about the benefits and the assistance that are given to these communities. They think that they won't be able to get it. And opportunities wouldn't be available to the people of the community if they don't support the present government, or if they are seen opposing the government, they are automatically disqualified for whatever assistance or whatever. Well, to be more blunt, these grants and whatever goes to the communities.
Yeah.
Right? So that is one of the things. And a lot of indigenous communities, they don't, the actual information is not available, or it is not something that is popular, like the budget. They wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
Even I don't understand the budget.
Yeah. Many of us don't, in all fairness.
They don't understand the budget. And then they was, X amount of money is allocated for this. And that. Okay, the government is, we're going to benefit from this money.
Yeah.
And then the money is never,
Just a quick sidebar. It seems like a trump card that politics has over communities where, you kind of, like you said, if you don't vote this way or cast your vote that way, you don't reap the benefits or the welfare that you're entitled to.
Yeah.
But what is the way forward to empower a community where they don't necessarily have to rely on constant welfare? I'm just thinking, because if there's always a cycle of, okay, we get enough where we can make it through 5 years, it being used, for lack of a better word, as a political football back and forth. Is there any way to sort of, free communities? How can they be independent of having to rely on government for these things, and be more independent? I guess I don't want to use those words. This is a very sensitive topic.
Yes.
But how do they get out of that entrapment?
Well, it all comes down to the information given to them. I think that the economic situation in a lot of indigenous communities play a huge role in their support of politics, right? Well, we know of the promising season, as to what I call it, right? And a lot of people in these communities see this as something big, something huge. Oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And every election season, they would have the handouts, bring a bike, give this community a tractor, a saw, whatever it is, they bring that to you and said, oh, we're going to do this for you, we're going to do that for you. And then the people, let's vote this way. They said they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And then, of course, some of the things may materialize from time to time, but that's not everything. But it all comes back to their dependency. Not only Indigenous people, there are many Guyanese.
Of course.
Their dependency is like the root cause of their decision. And the coastline is different, where you find jobs. But then in an Indigenous community where people have to rely on farming, very small scale fishing or hunting, these kind of things to feed their families. And somebody comes in and say, oh, we're going to give everybody a food hamper and you get a bag of rice and sugar, whatever it is, these things that you need. And you have little children there who need these things, right?
Yep.
You're going to go for that. And then if you have 6 children, like my cousin, and you get Because We Care grant, you see that's something huge.
Yeah.
Right? So they're the whole dependency. And I say this to a lot of people that I, would from time to time get into the political gaffe about.
Yeah.
We have to stop being so dependent. Stop waiting for handouts. Stop waiting for the fish. Learn to fish. Learn to sustain yourself. Learn to do something. I mean, it's difficult being in a community. So going to different, like when it comes to entrepreneur, whatever,
Yeah.
it's difficult for us, of course, in the communities. But then
Probably way more challenging than...
very, because of the geographics and all of that.
Yeah.
But then if you...
Not to mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the short term of community government, right? Like the council is only every 2-3 years. So
3.
3, but you're switching every 3.
Yeah.
There's and it kind of, the dynamics are, it requires everyone to be on the same page, which is...
In order for our economic system to change, everybody needs to collaborate.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. People are so politically affiliated now. Oh, these persons who are handling whatever funding is there, oh, they're supporting this party, we're supporting the other party. They're not going to help us because we're opposition. That happens in these communities.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of handouts is to keep... You don't give info, you give handouts. So whatever these people, whatever they don't know, leave them that way. Don't let them know. Because we're going to give them this and, they will keep voting for us or whatever,
Yeah.
That is how you control the vote. You control that political, how should I say this? Their loyalty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of hit the nail on the head for me, because I feel the same way here. Just up to the other day, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I'm just saying, like, I wish the powers that be, government and opposition and everybody in charge of agencies provided more information.
Yeah.
So people are informed to make their own conclusions, right? It's not just I'm relying on whoever in power to tell me how things are. It also limits the future generations, because we can't have our children critically think on issues because it's objective information. That would mean the power dynamic shifts to independent thinking.
Exactly.
And to me, it's so frustrating, because it's like, you can't be on one hand preaching, we're pushing for a better Guyana and our youths to come up and take over, and then you're hoarding all this information.
Exactly.
Information is the key to our development. The new minds have to think about it differently as they're growing up. Oh, we know where our water comes from. We know how our sewage system is handled. If we have this operating here, we can shift to, how about this idea? We shift, to prevent more flooding. It's really stifling our growth at the fundamental level. And that's my biggest frustration. I mean, sorry to vent here. I'm saying this because I'm reaching out to a lot of people in government right now to come and talk about these things. I don't care about what this person did when they were in power. And we don't care about that. We just want to know how the systems work, because the more we know, the more we can work together.
Exactly.
It doesn't benefit people to work against the government of the day. Nobody wins. But if we can, come together, harness our collective energy, and at least create discourse, everyone wins.
Exactly. For example, one of the biggest topic that I have heard of, and people would ask questions about, the oil industry.
Yeah.
Now, if that info is not even available to who is looking for it, how do you respond to that? Right? Everybody's saying, oh, Guyana is going to be, in the next few years, the oil boom, the money. And yet people are starving. Yet people can't afford to provide basic needs for the children. And this is how do you explain this? The information is not there. I can just give you as the most I know, the best of my knowledge, but I can't speak on behalf of I can't give you the full truth about it because I don't know. Because those information is never available. I've had a few, of course, because of my, how should I put this? I'm very vocal, and as you realize by now, I am not afraid of speaking. So because of that, a lot of political parties, a lot of representatives, they would, approach me, to be part of what they do and, use me as a tool to meet with the indigenous peoples because, of course, I can relate to them. I understand their needs and whatever.
Of course.
And, at one time I actually took it seriously. When I was I decided to go see what's the whole makeup of the whole political thing. And
when the last election?
It was with Schumann.
Okay.
With the Liberty and Justice Party. But it didn't work out for me the way I had thought. Well, not because of the votes gathered or gained or whatever, but different aspects of it. But it's not something that I would want to pursue as an individual because to me it gets you nowhere.
Yeah.
I prefer to be a representative of the people from all walks of life.
Yeah, maybe it also pigeonholes you in a way when you get in the political spectrum because, you're associated with you. I'm making this up. I don't know what you did, but, if you campaign for Schumann, okay, you're pigeonholed into whatever they make of him. And that you're so much, obviously your scope of work is so much bigger than politics.
Exactly.
And then, in hindsight, I think I'm not speaking up for you, but now that he's not even in politics anymore, what was all that work for?
Exactly.
What did you gain or achieve, or what, how did that? What was the collateral to your scope of work? Now that you're telling me, you went to, if I may, and I'll cut this if you don't want it in, but you're telling me you went to a political forum the other day, and you cut for information as everyone is entitled to do.
Yeah.
And you queried something with regards to the party stance as a citizen. And you were automatically labeled as LJP being present, So that it's unfortunate that sort of is, the reality of even being remotely involved in a political landscape just because you want some change.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
a bummer.
I've had Ever since LJP time, I've had oh a lot of comments on my affiliations with politics. Well, it doesn't really,
What were the comments?
yeah, it doesn't really bother me. Like, in the moment, I like.
What was the issue with being associated? Like I'm assuming you did it because of indigenous
Yeah,
rights.
I always, it is still something that, well, I'm a representative. Therefore, a representative from an indigenous person in it could be politics, it could be just on a national level, right? I would usually support them, even if not like in person, support their ideas
Yeah.
as indigenous people, because we as indigenous people, I think there is so much more that we can do, right? 50 years ago, how many indigenous doctors could you find?
Yeah.
But we're here.
Yeah.
Indigenous people are, they're representing, and a lot of in all walks of life, you would find, you may find a lawyer, doctors, nurses, business, So in any aspect of representation, when it comes to indigenous people, and if I do agree with what they're about, I would definitely support them, because I think that when you have a representative, or when you decide to represent your people, and well, politically it's representing Guyana, right? But if you're a representative of your people, you sort of the presence of the indigenous people is there, right? You could be, you know, on a national level, you could be a part of representing anything when it comes to culture, traditions, their health, their education, whatever people see you, they hear you when you're representing on a national level. So that is why I actually went to the idea of supporting, an indigenous person in politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, but politics is not my thing.
No,
But
definitely.
we all, as Guyanese, it is imperative that that decision, whatever decision you make when it comes to voting, it should be something that we must do, because it is part of what decides how our future goes, right? What happens in the future. And I tell this to a lot of young people, because, the youth of today, they say, they don't want to be involved in politics. They don't even want to vote, because, like, for my son as an example, he's like, Mommy, I wouldn't even waste my time to go vote.
Yeah.
I said, son, if you don't vote, then you get whatever happens after the election, you give the power to that person.
Yeah. It's the only power we really have.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super important. I actually think my prediction is that we'll have a low turnout this year. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. But I'm talking to a lot of people, and they're just like, especially the young people are not interested, because it's just nobody wants to sift through all the BS.
Nobody's seeing something that is worth
that. Exactly, that too. That too, yeah.
Nobody's seeing something that's worth going out there to for.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Back in the day when they talk about people coming out, since people waking up their neighborhood at 4:00 in the morning so they can go vote, and these things don't happen anymore.
But it's also you got to think that it's not just about, I'm voting because I hate the current system and I want to change it. It's more than that. It's like, I'm voting because I am so passionate about my community's direction. Together we're going for this national goal, That's the kind of voting, like, inspiration we need, and we're just not
Definitely.
getting that. And that's what should be taking a lot of youngsters, especially to the polls.
I think the fight between the present government and the opposition I think it's annoying to a lot of people, if I may put it that
You
way.
don't say. You don't
Because
say.
okay, as a party, as a government or an opposition, tell us something different. Stop fighting. Stop showing us your fights and trying to use us as a tool to garner votes. You know, it's annoying.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to hear that. We've been hearing that all our lives. Oh, this person's not doing this, so we're going to do it better. Oh, you were there, you didn't do anything, so now we're doing it. Oh.
Well, that's politics 101,
Yeah.
passing the buck. Just the last couple things before we close, I wanted to talk to you about. One is that, we just spoke about, the budget that passed that you and I don't fully understand yet. Actually,
Exactly.
matter of fact, I got somebody coming next week to discuss it and hopefully put it in perspective. But I was wondering, because it's such a big conversation right now for everybody, how is the cost of living affecting you? I mean, are you finding it increasingly challenging? Everything seems to be going up. And, you kind of not really making as much. There's not really, for me personally, as a small business owner, I feel like I'm grateful for how I've built my business and I'm operating, but I feel like, and I'm grateful for doing what I do now, which I couldn't have done a couple years ago, but I don't feel like the level of opportunity in terms of growth for my business and my profession is as open as it is to people with more capital or bigger ventures. Or it feels like I'm part of a group that's also like, hey, what about us? Like, what are we doing over here? Like, so how's it been going for you?
Well, I must tell you, and I'm not ashamed to say this, most of my work is voluntary, right?
Okay.
And people may take this, whichever way. But I always say that I think I'm put here on this earth to do what I'm doing. And that has many challenges.
Yeah.
Not every day I can afford to cook 3 meals a day. But it's something that I've become accustomed to. Getting whatever payment, whatever for whatever work I'm doing. When you go into the supermarket, like, you got to think, do I need this or do I do which one do I choose?
Yeah.
You have to choose between, sometimes between comfort and necessity. So that is what life is like for me. And of course, I adjust. I have a 9-year-old who sometimes don't understand, we can't do this. We can't do that. I'm sorry, I can't you can't have this, And life is different now than when I was a child. I remember in primary school, I didn't have uniform. I used to go with whatever dress my mom put on me. I didn't have footwear. It was barefoot. No, I can't send my daughter to school like that. She's living in the city. She has to get a footwear. You got to get a uniform. Every day you got to get money to give her to buy a little snack, or sometimes she runs out of water. She has to get, additional water. Not a huge amount, but it's a daily necessity.
Yeah.
Taking care of one child. And imagine if I had 4. Even if
Like
I
your
had
cousin.
4, yeah. Oh, my cousin has 8 children, and she had like 6 in school. So imagine what life is like for those parents who, all right, you don't have your own home, you have to pay rent. There's a water bill, there's an electricity bill. In order for me to get my work done, I have to pay my internet bill. That is like one of the most important things to me. So imagine a single parent going through that. It's like a harsh reality.
Yeah. No, it's tough.
Yes.
I'm hoping there's some relief, man. There's at least bring down the cost of basic
Exactly.
necessities. Every time you go into supermarket, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is a punishment here.
I remember I was telling my kids, Yesterday, I was telling my daughter-in-law, we were having a conversation. She said, do you remember when sugar was like $80 a pound and $90 a pound?
Yeah.
And we used to think that is expensive then. I remember when you could get a bottle of oil for like 360, and around that. You can't get that now. The smallest pack of sugar, which is like 2 pounds, you know, some of the supermarkets you have to pay like over $500 for it,
Yeah.
and that is, well, I don't use sugar on a daily basis, but for somebody like my son, for instance, my eldest, he would make a mug of swank. So when he's around, you have to have sufficient sugar in your house. So imagine if these basic things, because sugar is something a lot of Guyanese think is compulsory to use on a
Yeah.
daily basis,
Yeah.
right? But sugar, rice, those things,
But these
when
are
you
things we
think,
produce,
yeah,
like, not
that's
even
the
like,
whole thing. I was looking at I was in Bounty supermarket. It's like, oh, versus Demerara gold. No, it's coming from somewhere else. These are things made in Guyana. I think it's somewhere. I think it's Albion. I can't say for sure, but it was somewhere a package with a Barbadian name
okay.
on it, and these are things that are being produced in our country, and look at the price. And then if you find something else cheaper, of course you would go for the cheaper one.
Yeah,
You know,
of course,
yeah.
out of necessity. Last question for you, and thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed this. What are your hopes for 2025? I know it's a big year for all of us. I mean, we're a quarter way through the century.
Yeah.
And for Guyana, I feel like there's a lot of things to look forward to, a lot of things to be hopeful about. There are obviously a lot of challenges we have too, but what are you hoping for this year? Like, what are your wishes for 2025?
Well, personally, I anticipate some positive work being done in my line of work for one. But I am not sure, with this year being an election year, how the Guyanese population will actually. I know this is the handout year, the gift sharing year, whatever, right? But I'm not sure how the public will react to that, because I know of people who say, like, whatever comes, whatever I can get from whoever, I would take it.
Yeah.
And that is the mentality of a lot of Guyanese. They accept what is, but when it comes to the whole election day events, a lot of people don't even turn out because people are so fed up with the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And now in this 2025, when we have oil and all the other natural resources, like I said before, people are still hungry. People are still, in need. And I don't see the changes, any drastic changes as of lately. So I was kind of uncertain about the events for the year. I know the whole election thing, you're going to go through the whole phases of it, of
Yeah.
everything that you're already accustomed to.
Yeah.
I saw, making light of the moment now, I saw that every newborn is entitled to 100 grand.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I think Guyana's population will,
Maybe that's the strategy.
maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I can only hope for the best. And in closing, I say in closing because I'm very thankful for this opportunity, of course. And, I would encourage anyone who listens to the type of work that I do, try to do something more. Indigenous people in general, try to do something more this year than you did last year in terms of preservation for culture. We are who we are, and we need to preserve that. So,
I love that. Thank you
yeah.
so much for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm glad we connected, and
Yeah.
I know, regardless of all the challenges, we'll do well this year. You know, we're gonna
Yeah.
do what we do, and you know, I'm excited to see what the worker you're gonna bring to the table. So thank you so
Yes,
much.
definitely. Future plans for the immediate future. You know, the Academic Council of Lokono, and we are hoping to, by September, to fund teachers. We're hoping to get the fund to pay teachers to teach the language, even if it's not endorsed or if it's not added to the school curriculum. It is our hope that we can actually find teachers that can go to the various communities that we're working with so far and teach the language to the children especially. And, well, the community development projects as well. I hope to expand on these and meet with more communities and leaders to see how best we can keep the whole revitalization process, you know, all these efforts to expand on it. So hopefully, you know, by the end of the year, we would be able to do more, you know. Resource-wise, you know, it's challenging, but we're getting there, you know. So I am definitely hoping to, you know, how should I say, expand and share more, be more, do more, you know, by the end of this year. So 2026, maybe I'll have my own radio station.
Cheers to that. Thank you so much for coming, Sam. It's a wonderful time having you.
Thank you.